Today we're talking about 4 proven ways to break free from overthinking. Welcome back to another episode of the Movement, Mind, and Meaning podcast, Mind and Body Tools to Thrive Beyond Depression and Anxiety. I'm your host, Megan Nolan, and I probably could have been the captain a few times over of the Overthinking Not So Anonymous Club. I don't know about you. I think I probably should get a tattoo, give myself a gold star, because if I'm good at anything, I'm really good at overthinking things. I laugh because otherwise I might cry. No, I'm just kidding. It's an interesting thing, and that's why we're talking about this today. Today we're talking about 4 science-backed tools and techniques to help you to shift this habit, to stop the spiral, to reclaim your mental freedom, to reclaim your pranic energy from the round and round we go of the overthinking. So, before we get into these 4 tools, I have created something new that I'm really excited about that really inspired this episode. So I have a brand new mini book. I have a mini book for you that is called Stop Anxious Overthinking. And so they are 11 keys to breaking the spiral and reclaiming your mental freedom. 11 keys. Today we're talking about 4 of them. Okay, so I don't want to give away it all, but make sure to go to the link in the show notes and grab your free mini book, because that's what this is all about. So it's the Stopping the Anxious Overthinking, because hello, it's a thing. So have you ever had an experience where you did a presentation? If you listened to Allison's episode last week, she was talking about after her speaking gig and how her brain wanted to just go into the critiquing everything, right? And so have you ever had that experience? I certainly have myself. Or have you ever had a conversation where you go back and you go over every little detail, or you think about something that you did and you think about how you could have done it differently and how you should have said this and how you could have done that, and really going back into it and going over it and over it and over it and over it, replaying past mistakes. Or maybe it's worrying about the future, right? Maybe you have a record month in your business and you're like, am I going to be able to repeat this? God knows, who knows, right? And we tend to loop into that pattern, right? We loop into that pattern. And as we know, if we are stressed about something, anxiety is a response to that stress. And so it's really important that we just recognize all of this and we come at this through our lens, right? Which we definitely talk about in this community. And if you're new, welcome. It's very important to look through the lens of compassionate curiosity, right? To look at ourselves and learn, right? Seeing that this is an opportunity for growth and expansion and recognition of patterns that maybe aren't as aligned as they were, right? Maybe not as what you want to be repeating. And so it's not just frustrating to find ourselves looping in these patterns, but it actually, when we are fixated, when we're hyperfixating, it can feed anxiety, it can feed stress, it can feed depression, because we tend to either, project ourselves forward into the future or return back into the past and ruminate on stuff, right? Also something I'm highly skilled at. Again, I laugh because it's who I am, right? But it's all this recognition and these patterns, and it's a skill, but it's not one I practice as much anymore. Thank goodness. Tap on the shoulder, gold star to me. So today we're talking about 4 science-backed techniques for you to stop, shift, change this pattern of overthinking. So the first technique is called future pacing. And it's all about going to the end and reconsidering the situation that you're looping about. So let's just say you have the most healthy, vibrant life and you're on your last day. And you're looking back at this moment that you are in the midst of, that you are spiraling and you're questioning and you're doubting and you're pontificating. If you go to that last day and you look back on this thing that you are all sorts of focused on, fixated on, obsessed with in this moment, is this really going to matter? Is this really going to matter? And then if you back it up a little bit, is this really going to matter in 10 years? Is this really going to matter in 1 year? Is this really going to matter in a month? Is this really going to matter tomorrow? Probably not, right? And if it meets all of those, definitely not. But if it's one of those things that isn't going to matter on that last day, why are we feeding it the way we're feeding it is the question. So we want to future pace. We want to fast forward past the fear and really shift out of that very short-term focus that can happen when we are in overthinking mode, right? What we're doing here is zooming out. You're giving yourself a much different perspective. And so here's what's interesting with this is that when we're experiencing stress and anxiety, there's actually a narrowing of your pupils, right? Because that's one of your survival mechanisms is hyperfixation of your eyesight. And so it's very fixated, one-pointed focus because you got to get away from whatever it is the threat. And so when we are pausing here and we are zooming out, you're widening the lens, which is what happens when you're in a regulated state, when we shift out of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn into stay and play, into tend and befriend, and into rest and digest. There's a widening of your pupils. You literally get more information. You can see more of what's happening. And so it's that same physiologically what's happening in your body is what you're doing there, is what you're doing there when you zoom out and you go into the future and you're future pacing yourself. And so this is really important is we're giving ourselves this distancing, right? We're giving ourselves some perspective and it reduces the emotional intensity of it because you're like, no, probably not. Probably won't be as big of a deal as my brain is making it out to be right now. Even things that are really, really big, usually when we take that wider perspective, it gives us that sense of clarity. It gives us that sense of peace, right? Because the brain is working to control the situation as much as it can. And of course, when it comes to, for example, like, after we've done a talk and our brain wants to go over everything so that we pick up on the fine minutia of what was good, what wasn't good, this, that, or the other thing, is that we're making it more likely that we perform well in the future. But if we go back there and all we can fixate on was that, that silly joke that you made that nobody laughed at, but the rest of the talk was amazing and so many people came up to you and said, wow, that was incredible. But all you can think about is the joke that fell flat. And you're like, I screwed it up. The Buddha had a beautiful quote that said, in a field of 1,000 flowers, all we remember is the snake, is we tend to hyperfixate on the negative because of its importance in our survival, right? It's not important for you to remember the pretty flowers. It's important, vital, in fact, potentially in the case of some snakes, that you remember the snake, right? And metaphorically, I hope that you're understanding that the snake is the joke that fell flat and the flowers are the round of applause that you got at the end, the people that were excited to talk to you. So we want to make sure that we can zoom out, okay? So that's technique number 1. Technique number 2, unless you are officially a psychic, I'm going to need you to stop attempting to read other people's minds. Okay? One of the biggest overthinking traps is that we assume to know exactly what other people are thinking. Do you? Do you know exactly what they're thinking? No. We tend to have this sort of like, oh my God, they must have thought I was so stupid when I said that. Oh my God, that joke was ridiculous. Oh, they didn't text me back. Maybe they're mad at me. Maybe their phone fell in the toilet. Like, you have no idea, right? You have no idea. We tend to assume the worst. And so that's really important, and the reality check is, let's be real. Most of the time, people are so in their head thinking about this same sort of stuff that they don't even notice as much as we think they do, right? They're probably so worried about their own stuff and thinking about themselves and how they're going to show up to be judging us. Like, it's just the thing, And if they're judging you, then let them judge, because all judgment is self-judgment and their opinion is none of your business, And so I love that quote. I think it was Eckhart Tolle, that what other people people think of me is none of my business. It's one of those ones that you gotta really like massage yourself into because it's a good one. So we want to make sure to assume neutrality, right? We don't, unless you have clear evidence of what's going on, then it's really important that we don't waste energy filling in the blanks with your brain. Because what's happening here is actually what psychologists call the spotlight effect, right? We believe that people notice way more than they actually do. We feel like we're in the spotlight, but people are so in their head and thinking about the 842 things that they have to do today that they're probably not even noticing. So the interesting game to play here is the next time you find yourself mind reading, flip the script. What is the possible alternative to this? What you think is happening, like the worst case scenario here. So in yoga, you've probably been in some poses where you're upside down-ish, right? Like a forward fold or downward dog, or maybe you've done more advanced poses like handstand, shoulder stand, forearm, et cetera, et cetera. You're turning yourself upside down, right? And so the yoga teaching for this is Pratipaksha Bhavana, and it means to flip it on its head, right? And that's what we do when we invert our body, is we essentially flip yourself on your head, but you're not, most poses you're not actually on your head. Anyways, I don't need to be nitpicky. We turn it upside down and we get a different perspective, right? So that's the practice here, is what is the opposite that we're playing here? Like, because in the universe, where one of the laws of the universe is the law of polarity, that in any situation, the opposite must exist. And so it's so important. It's like the yin and the yang, the moon and the sun, and all those things. And so if we are fabricating this story in our head, what is the opposite to that story? And so when we catch ourselves attempting to mind read, we want to pause and see what the opposite could be. And how does the opposite feel? Because I bet the opposite probably feels a hell of a lot better than the negative spiral that you were just getting sucked into. Okay, so technique number 3, no more replays. No more replays. What do I mean? Our mind likes to go back and 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 then tell 42 other people about it and go back and go back and go back. And so what we are doing here is actually replaying the conversation, replaying that moment over and over in your head. And it's like a mental movie, right? And then you go and tell other people about it, and then you're still pissed off about it, and then you go tell your sister, and then you call somebody, and anyways, crowdsourcing this moral support for the situation, right? And so this is important. So no more rewinding, okay? No more rewinding. When you catch yourself going back into this, ask yourself, is this hurting me? How does this feel right now, right? Because you want to feel your feels, right? In the power pause movement, that's our core mantra, is feel the feels. And then you take a power pause. If you're feeling good and you want to expand that feeling, do it. If you're not feeling in your vibe of your vision and the way that you truly want to feel, the frequency of your future and that expansive place that you want to live from, then we need to do something about it. And that's what power pauses are. So is this helping you or is this hurting you, right? And so here's what's really interesting, because we want to shift our focus if it's not feeling good, because what's happening here is when we go back and ruminate, which is very common when we're experiencing sadness and when we're in more of a freeze or a shutdown state, is we tend to go back and we loop back in the experience, and we go over it and over it in our mind, and it keeps us stressed because it feeds that same emotional reaction and response that the initial situation did, right? It recreates that because your brain doesn't know the difference between you having that lived physical experience that first time, that one time, and every other 842 times that you go back and experience it. 842 is, it might seem like a lot, but I'm willing to bet you've done it at least, 42 times, okay? Because here's what's really interesting, is you are actually fortifying that pathway when you go back and you repeat the scenario over and over and over. When you beat yourself up for the mistake again and again and again, you're actually strengthening that reaction. What? Say what? Yeah, you're actually making it more likely because you're showing your brain it's something that you're rehearsing again and again and again. And it says, well, if we're doing this over and over, this must be important. Let's make this more efficient. And it hardwires that neural pathway and makes it likely when you're presented with a similar situation, the pathway is clear going in that direction. What do you think is going to happen? More likely that you repeat that same pattern, right? And then we get more fuel for the mind that's like, see, I told you so, you were gonna do it again. Rawr. That's what mine sounds like sometimes. Maybe a little less piratey, but you get the idea. So, okay, well, how do I weaken my myelin sheaths, Megan, is what you're asking, right? No, I mean, how do I change the pattern is also what you're asking if you just said that. You're so smart, you know about your brain. Good job. So yeah, that's what happens is when we do the same thing, we groove the same path. It's like the grooves on a record, right? So you're strengthening it, and it's like when you're walking in the forest, right? You walk the path, and the path becomes more and more obvious, and then it becomes a clear path, right? And so how do we shift that? Well, here's where it's cool, where you get to use your imagination for good and not evil. Not that rumination and overthinking is evil, but you know, it kind of was funny. But anyways, so we go back and we revision the scenario. So it's that same pratipaksha bhavana, is if we're going to flip it and we're going to go a different way with the scenario, and we're going to flip it on its head, and we're going to think about, okay, I made that mistake. And we get to practice compassion, fierce self-compassion, is that first and foremost is that mindfulness, right? And then you might remember the second pillar of fierce self-compassion is common humanity. Everybody makes mistakes. It's common to do this, right? And to be kind to yourself, right? And so then we can look at it from this renewed perspective of compassionate curiosity, non-judgmental self-awareness, and you're flipping it on its head and you're like, well, how would I have preferred that I handled it, right? How would I have rather behaved, or what would I wish I would have said, rather than like going back and beating yourself up and repeating the same story and the same experience and fortifying that pattern in yourself. You get to flip it and decide, ooh, okay, wow, you know, I wish that I had handled it more gracefully. I wish that I had taken a power pause, got myself centered, anchored myself, taken some breaths, and then decided to go forward, whatever you wish actually had happened, and rehearse that instead. Because when you rehearse that, mentally rehearse that with feeling, very important, with feeling, your brain doesn't know the difference between real and imagined. But if we're going back in there and with that feeling of, oh my God, I really screwed that up, that's a hell of a lot of feeling, and that's a strong feeling, because when it's really tapped into that emotional state of that regret and the frustration and the discouragement and all of that, then the brain tags that as highly important. And so it's so beautiful that you can use that mechanism of your brain and your nervous system to your advantage, right? So if you go back and you overthink and you're beating yourself up, and you know, we love ourselves and we're forgiving ourselves for doing that in the past, but going forward, now you know the brain science is that if you go back and you do that, you're making it more likely you're going to do the thing in the future, right? And so instead, what can you do to shift it? What do you want to do instead? Let's repattern that behavior by feeling the satisfaction of, oh, okay, I'm so proud of myself. I remembered to take a power pause. I said, hey, I just need a second, or whatever it is that you wish you would have done, and really feel yourself doing that. Feel yourself being compassionate. Feel yourself being proud that you did it. Feel yourself in your serene queen, serene being energy that's like, yes, I have unshakable presence. Yes, I'm the most centered and grounded person because I do my power pauses on the regular, and you handle it differently. Okay, that's technique number 3. No more replays. No more replays. All right, so now we are at technique number 4. Technique number 4. Get out of your head and into your body. Take a power pause. I don't know. I kind of wish I had a New York accent sometimes, apparently. I just do it enough that I think I do, but I probably don't. Anyways, I digress. Overthinking is a problem that happens in your head. And maybe I don't want to call it a problem. It's a thing. It's a thing. We don't want to label it as a problem, but a problem is, it's something generally that we are frustrated with and want to change. So yeah, maybe, but I don't want to label it as negative. So it's a situation, but it happens in your head. Okay, it's a thing in your head. And so when we are in our head, as you know already, right, we're activated in the survival center of the brain. We're active in the amygdala, which is not your creative, expansive masterpiece Einstein brain. It's the Frankenstein brain, where it's like problem, alert, alert. And so we want to feel the feels and take a power pause. Feel the feels and take a power pause. So that's so beautiful and impactful. Literally the fastest way to shift your inner state is taking a power pause. Cultivating calm on command in any situation, right? Stopping stress in its tracks to be the most powerful person in any room, because you are in charge. You are taking care of your own needs in that moment, right? And these signals from our body of the anxiety or the overthinking, it's just like any other cue from your body, right? It's like when you're hungry or you're thirsty and you're like, oh, I probably need a snack. I haven't eaten in a few hours. Oh, I'm kind of thirsty. I feel a little headache coming on. We drip water through the day because we drink water through the day. We want to take these little power pauses throughout the day to keep yourself regulated, right? And when you notice that you're in the spirals of overthinking, and if you want to stop the spiral, break the spiral, and reclaim your mental freedom, because you're not just looping around in that torturous cycle of beating yourself up, which I've certainly been there, so I love you and I see you, but it's a thing that many high-achieving, ambitious people do, because we want to do it better next time. And when we don't excel at something, you're so used to being really good at something that when you screw it up, you're like, I'm a failure. What is the matter with me? No, you're not necessarily good at everything right away. It's okay, right? We want to have that common humanity and that forgiveness and that little bit of humility, right? So let's talk about the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding power pause. Okay, so especially when we are in the spirals of overthinking, it's so important for you to come into your body. And all power pauses take you out of your head into your body, but it's so important for us to have a tool that is really almost tactile in nature. And so this one is literally so easy. You've probably heard of it before. It's pretty popular. And so we want to look around and label, or in your head or out loud say, 5 things that you can see. So do it with me. Phone, ring light, refrigerator, magnets, box. Take a breath. So we go 5 things that we can see. 4 things that you can touch. Shirt, necklace, slippers underneath my feet, hair. Okay? 4 things that you can touch. Keep breathing. 3 sounds that you can hear. I hear a dog barking. I hear wind. I hear birdies. Okay? So 5 things we can see, 4 things we can touch, 3 things we can hear, 2 things you can smell. I can smell lotion, or maybe my hair, and I can smell my house. Okay? And then number 1, take 1 slow, big, deep breath. Let's do it again. We're going to breathe in for 4. Hold for 2. Exhale for 6, out the mouth. So what we're doing here is instantly shifting you out of your head into your body, into the present moment, stopping the cycle of overthinking in its tracks. So if you're watching this Power Pause on YouTube, this is actually part of a full episode titled 4 Science-Backed Ways to Stop Overthinking. Oh, to break free from overthinking, pardon me. But actually, if you haven't already, go ahead and grab my brand new mini book. So I have a brand new free mini book called Stop Anxious Overthinking, and there's 11 keys. We're going over 4 here, but we go them in more depth in the free mini book. So make sure to check out the link in the show notes to grab that free mini book. So those are the 4 techniques that I wanted to share with you today. And I really know that when you use these, it will bring you so much more peace, so much more feeling of a reclamation of your mental freedom and spaciousness. Because right now, when we get looped into these patterns of overthinking, we are feeding those thoughts, we're feeding the worries, we're feeding the fears. And that is giving your energy to that. It's really perpetrating more of that, because what we focus on grows, right? And I know that it's can feel really challenging to break, and that's why these are pattern interrupts in the moment, very fast, very effective, very doable, very realistic, because these are patterns and you can shift them. You just learned about rewiring your brain, right? This is so incredible. Your brain is malleable plastic, right? Neuroplasticity is what it's called. And so it's so important to remember that you're not destined to this, right? It might be a habit that you've practiced and therefore the path is worn, right? And so it's one of those things that it takes time, it takes mental repetition, it takes practice, just like anything else, in order for us to master this, in order for us to catch ourselves in it. And truth be told is that, more than likely, we're never gonna eradicate this completely, right? It's something that you'll learn to catch more quickly and be more compassionate with while you're doing it, and when you catch yourself in those patterns, so that you can stop the spiral, that you can reclaim that mental freedom more quickly, right? And find compassion with more ease, with more grace. Because when the mind has its way, it wants us to just over and over, right? And now you know why that is likely happening, because it's happened. And so that's what I wanted to share with you today. I really hope that those were super insightful. Again, those are 4 of the 11 keys to truly doing this and making a massive shift in your life, in your energy, in your cultivation of an unshakable presence, so that you can be the centered person, the grounded person, in the vibe of your vision, the fully expressed, fully confident, fully true to yourself, in integrity with your values, like showing up from that place of who you really are, and not letting anxiety and sadness and depression and stress run the show anymore. How does that sound? Because that's what's available to you, 1,000%. Believe me, I know this because that's what happened for me, right? It used to be that anxiety was running the show, and it was running the show underneath the surface, and I was frustrated with it, and it was my vibe. It was my predominant emotion, and it did not feel good, I will tell you that. And I will tell you that I spent way too long with it running the show. And which is why I am clearly getting passionately fired up about this right now, because I don't want that to be the case for you. I don't want it to last as long as it did for me. Please, for the love of all things holy. I mean, you're listening to the podcast, and if you got this far, then I know you care, right? I know you really care about your mental health. I know that you know it's important. I know that you're part of this mission of redefining success by prioritizing your health and your happiness. So, thank you for being here. Make sure to grab the freebie. Show notes, grab it, totally free, brand new mini book. I think I just named it that so I could call it the mini book. Anyways, I hope I made you laugh. I hope I help you grow a few new brain cells in there. I am so grateful for you. Please share this episode with anyone that you know that might really benefit from this. Just take a wild shot in the dark. Do you know anybody that is passionate, ambitious, really driven? I guarantee you they overthink from time to time, okay? So they probably could benefit. They maybe haven't come out and been like, I'm an overthinker, Megan. I mean, whatever your name is. But chances are you can just take a wild shot in the dark. Just be like, hey, I started listening to this awesome podcast. She's all about supporting people who are very passionately going after their goals and sometimes get tripped up by the mental banter that's happening in their head all the time. I would appreciate that a lot. Anyways, that's all for today. Love you lots. Bye.